When people talk about NHL arenas, the usual names come up first. The Montreal Forum, Maple Leaf Gardens, Madison Square Garden, Joe Louis Arena, the old Boston Garden. Buildings with banners, ghosts, bad seats, loud crowds, and decades of history baked into the concrete. But then there's another category, the strange NHL arena. These are the buildings that make you stop and ask, wait, they actually played NHL hockey there? Some were too small, some were built for basketball, some were built for baseball. Some were temporary homes that lasted longer than anyone wanted. A few became beloved because of how odd they were. Others became warnings for what happens when an NHL team moves into a building that was never properly designed for hockey. So today, we're looking at some of the strangest NHL arenas of all time. Not necessarily the worst, not necessarily the most famous, but the buildings that stand out because of their layout, their history, their atmosphere, or the fact that NHL players somehow had to call them home. A good place to start is Mullett Arena, because it may be the strangest modern NHL situation we have seen. From 2022 to 2024, the Arizona Coyotes played their home games at Arizona State University's Mullett Arena in Tempe. On paper, the building itself was not a joke. It was a new, clean, modern college hockey facility with 2 NHL regulation-size ice sheets, club areas, suites, and a very intimate feel. Arizona State describes it as a 5,000-seat venue built for its NCAA Division I hockey program, with 20 luxury suites and premium spaces. The strange part was the scale. This was the NHL, and the Coyotes were playing in a building smaller than some junior hockey arenas. Reports at the time noted that Mullett Arena held just over 5,000 fans, with capacity slightly reduced for NHL games. That made it the smallest permanent home venue in modern NHL history. Fans were close to the glass, the student section was visible, and every game had a totally different sound than a normal 17,000-seat arena. In some ways, that made it fun. The atmosphere was tight, loud, and different. But from a league standard point of view, it was an emergency home, not a long-term answer. The Coyotes' Mullett Arena era came after their lease situation in Glendale collapsed. Reuters later summarized the franchise's path clearly. The team moved from Winnipeg to Arizona in 1996, played in Phoenix, later moved to Glendale in 2003, and then ended up at Mullett Arena after the Glendale lease was terminated following the 2021-22 season. That is what makes Mullett so strange. The building itself was not bad. For college hockey, it was excellent. For the NHL, it was surreal. A major professional league team spent 2 full seasons in a campus arena with a capacity closer to a packed high school football game than a normal NHL crowd. It became one of the most memorable arena oddities in league history, and probably one the NHL does not want to repeat. Then there is Barclays Center in Brooklyn, the home of the New York Islanders from 2015 until their eventual move to UBS Arena. Barclays Center was not small, old, or low budget. It was a major, modern arena in New York City. The issue was simple. It was not truly built for hockey. Basketball fit the building. Concerts fit the building. Hockey, however, felt forced into the space. The Islanders' rink configuration created strange sightlines, awkward seating areas, and one of the more famous visual quirks in recent NHL history, the off-center scoreboard. When you watched games from certain angles, the scoreboard did not appear to sit naturally over center ice, because the hockey rink had to be placed in a way that worked around the building's original design. The seating problem became a major story almost immediately. CBS New York reported before the Islanders' full move that Barclays Center's CEO said about 400 seats had obstructed views, and some of the worst seats would not be sold. Yahoo Sports also covered the issue in 2015, noting that some Barclays hockey seats became famous for terrible sightlines and obstructions. And the strangest part was that this was happening in a brand new era of arena design. This was not a 1930s rink trying to survive in a modern league. This was a new building in a major market. And still, it produced one of the weirdest hockey viewing experiences in the NHL. The Islanders eventually got their proper hockey home at UBS Arena, which opened in 2021 and replaced both Nassau Coliseum and Barclays Center as the franchise's home. UBS Arena seats 17,250 for hockey, giving the Islanders a building designed around the sport instead of a building trying to make room for it. Barclays Center will always be remembered as one of the strangest NHL homes because it showed how important hockey geometry really is. You cannot just place a rink inside any arena and expect it to work. And fans notice when a building is fighting the sport. That brings us to America West Arena in Phoenix, now known as Footprint Center. Before the Coyotes played in Glendale, before Mullett Arena, before the franchise moved its hockey operations to Utah, the team played downtown in Phoenix after relocating from Winnipeg in 1996. The arena was home to the NBA's Phoenix Suns and was built primarily for basketball. That became a serious problem. Sportsnet's look back at the Coyotes' Arizona experiment noted that the arena did not transfer well to hockey because a large number of seats had obstructed views of the ice. Later reporting about possible arena sites in the valley also pointed back to the same core issue. The building was only built for basketball, and the north end created thousands of obstructed view seats for hockey. For the Coyotes, this meant the team began its Arizona life in a building that immediately worked against it. That matters because first impressions are huge for a relocated franchise. The Winnipeg Jets had moved into a non-traditional hockey market, and instead of giving fans a clean NHL building, the team played in an arena where many spectators could not properly see the entire ice surface. In a way, America West Arena was the early warning version of what later happened with Barclays Center and Delta Center. Basketball-first arenas can be beautiful buildings, but hockey exposes every design compromise. The Coyotes eventually moved to Glendale in 2003, but that created its own long-term problems because the arena was far from many fans in the Phoenix metro area. So the franchise went from a downtown building that did not fit hockey to a hockey-friendly building that had location issues to a college arena that was too small. That arena history alone makes the Coyotes one of the strangest venue stories in NHL history. Another current example belongs to Utah, with Delta Center in Salt Lake City. When Utah entered the NHL for the 2024-25 season, the team moved into Delta Center, the longtime home of the NBA's Utah Jazz. The building had major league infrastructure, downtown location, and ownership control. But again, the problem was hockey fit. Delta Center announced that during Utah's first NHL season, the arena would accommodate up to 16,000 fans, with 10,000 seats featuring unobstructed views. That also meant thousands of seats were partial view seats. Sportsnet later quoted Gary Bettman saying there were plans to increase unobstructed capacity to 17,000 within 2 seasons, while acknowledging the temporary setup included obstructed seating. The NHL has since described the arena's renovation plan as a multi-season transformation into a true dual-sport venue. In 2025, Smith Entertainment Group introduced a new seating system as part of the Delta Center conversion, with the goal of providing sightlines for every seat. The project included raising the floor and installing a movable riser system that can shift between basketball and hockey configurations. That makes Delta Center strange in a different way. It is not a disaster story. It is an active engineering project. The building is being rebuilt around the reality of having both NBA and NHL tenants. But the first version of NHL hockey in the building still belongs on this list because thousands of seats with partial ice views is a very unusual way to launch a franchise. Now, let's go back to one of the best names in arena history, the Cow Palace. The San Jose Sharks played their first 2 NHL seasons at the Cow Palace in Daly City, just outside San Francisco, from 1991 to 1993. The Sharks' own history confirms that the team played there before moving into San Jose Arena, now SAP Center, in September 1993. The Cow Palace opened in 1941 and was originally known as the California State Livestock Pavilion. It hosted rodeos, political conventions, basketball, concerts, and plenty of non-hockey events. Its name alone makes it sound like a building from another sport, another era, or another universe. But for 2 seasons, it was an NHL rink. Sportsnet later described the Sharks' original home as having an undersized ice rink and even the lingering aroma from rodeos and livestock events. That is the kind of detail that makes old arenas fascinating. Modern buildings are polished, branded, and controlled. The Cow Palace was rougher, stranger, and much more improvised. The Sharks were also terrible in those early years, especially in 1992-93, when they set records for futility. But the Cow Palace still became part of the franchise's origin story. It was cramped, loud, and weird. Fans packed the place even as the team struggled badly. And then, once the Sharks moved to San Jose Arena, the franchise immediately felt more like a proper NHL operation. The Cow Palace was strange because it was both temporary and iconic. It was not a polished launchpad for a new franchise. It was a livestock pavilion turned NHL home. And somehow, that fits the early 1990s expansion era perfectly. The Tampa Bay Lightning also began in a truly strange setting, Expo Hall at the Florida State Fairgrounds. The Lightning's first season came in 1992 to 93, and their first home was not a downtown arena or a long-term NHL venue. It was an exhibition hall at the fairgrounds. The Tampa Bay Times described the franchise's first home as a converted livestock pavilion at the Florida State Fairgrounds. Expo Hall seated around 10,000 for hockey, with some sources listing hockey capacity at 10,425. The building was small, temporary, and extremely unusual for a new NHL team. The hockey writers described the location as a 10,000-seat Expo Hall, about 7 miles east of downtown Tampa, where the Lightning played their first game on October 7, 1992. Again, this was the early 1990s NHL expansion era. The league was pushing into new markets, and facilities were not always ready. Tampa Bay had the team before it had the long-term building. So the Lightning started in a fairgrounds hall, then moved into an even stranger place, the ThunderDome. The ThunderDome, now Tropicana Field, was built for baseball. From 1993 to 1996, the Lightning played NHL hockey inside a domed baseball stadium. NHL.com described it as a domed baseball stadium partitioned into a 28,000-seat hockey facility, unlike anything players had seen. And strangely enough, it worked in one very specific way: attendance. On April 23, 1996, the Lightning drew 28,183 fans for Game 4 of their playoff series against the Philadelphia Flyers, which NHL.com notes still stands as the largest crowd ever for a Stanley Cup playoffs game. That is what makes the ThunderDome so weird. It was not a normal hockey arena, but it gave the NHL one of its most bizarre attendance records. The sightlines were not intimate. The building was huge, wide, and shaped for a completely different sport. But for a young franchise trying to prove hockey could work in Florida, the spectacle mattered. Expo Hall and the ThunderDome together might be the strangest back-to-back arena setup any NHL franchise has ever had. First, a fairgrounds livestock pavilion, then a baseball dome. Another strange NHL building was Buffalo Memorial Auditorium, better known as the Odd. The Odd was home to the Buffalo Sabres from 1970 to 1996. It was old, loud, and deeply connected to the city, but it also had quirks that would not survive in the modern NHL. One major oddity was the ice surface. Buffalo Memorial Auditorium was the last NHL arena where the ice sheet fell short of the league-mandated 200 by 85-foot standard. A smaller rink changes the game. The walls arrive faster. Forechecking feels tighter. Players have less room to escape pressure. The Odd also hosted one of the strangest games in Stanley Cup final history, the 1975 Fog Game between the Sabres and Philadelphia Flyers. The building's conditions created fog over the ice, and the game became famous for both the visibility issues and the bizarre moment involving a bat on the ice. That is old arena weirdness at its best. Not manufactured, not branded, just a building with flaws, heat, humidity, crowd noise, and chaos. The old Boston Garden fits this category too. Boston Garden was one of the NHL's most famous arenas, but it was also deeply unusual by modern standards. Its ice surface was undersized at about 191 feet by 83 feet, compared with the standard 200 by 85. It also had unusual bench and penalty box arrangements that could throw off visiting teams. For Bruins fans, those quirks were part of the charm. For opponents, they were part of the problem. Boston Garden was cramped, hot, loud, and hostile. The smaller ice contributed to a heavier, more physical style of hockey. It was not strange because it lacked history. It was strange because so many of its flaws became competitive character. And finally, there is the current Madison Square Garden, home of the New York Rangers. MSG is not strange in the same way as Mullett Arena or the Cow Palace. It is one of the most famous arenas in the world. But structurally and urbanistically, it is one of the NHL's most unusual homes. The current garden opened above Penn Station, creating one of the most debated arena and transit relationships in North America. The New Yorker described the arena as sitting over the station, with Penn Station's rail operations left underground after the old above-ground station was demolished. Inside, MSG also went through a major renovation from 2011 to 2013, with upgrades including new concourses, seating, locker rooms, video systems, and the famous Chase bridges suspended above the arena bowl. So while MSG is glamorous, it is also odd. It is a hockey arena stacked into one of the busiest pieces of urban infrastructure in the United States. It is a landmark, a business machine, a transit controversy, and an NHL rink all at once. That is the real theme with these arenas. Strange does not always mean bad. Sometimes strange means temporary. Sometimes it means too small. Sometimes it means too big. Sometimes it means the building was designed for basketball, baseball, livestock shows, or commuter rail before hockey entered the picture. Mullett Arena gave the NHL a college rink chapter. Barclays Center gave the Islanders a modern arena that never properly felt like a hockey home. America West Arena showed what happens when an NHL team inherits basketball sightlines. Delta Center became a live renovation project for the future of dual sport arena design. The Cow Palace and Expo Hall brought NHL hockey into buildings with fairground and livestock roots. The ThunderDome put a hockey rink inside a baseball dome and somehow set a playoff attendance record. The Odd and Boston Garden reminded everyone that old barns could be flawed, intimidating, and unforgettable. The NHL has played in some beautiful buildings. It has also played in some very strange ones. And honestly, those strange arenas are part of what makes the league's history so interesting. Because every polished, modern arena tells you where the NHL wants to go. But the strange ones tell you how messy, creative, and sometimes ridiculous the journey has been.
And that's our video today on the strangest NHL arenas. Now, some of them, strange, not like spooky ghost stories, things of that sense, but just strange setups, how they've been arranged from their conceptualization to being where they are today, or not today. Some of them clearly are demolished. But that said, let me know your take, or your thoughts and feedback down below. And I'll see you next time on TFC Stadiums. Ciao.